Welcome to the Fascia-Informed Therapist, the essential podcast for occupational therapy professionals looking to deepen their understanding of fascia's pivotal role in therapy and health. I'm your host, Amy Mayer, an experienced occupational therapist, practice owner, and dedicated educator. Here we'll dive into the fascinating world of fascia, exploring its significance in the human body and its critical influence on occupational therapy practice. Each episode will bring you cutting-edge insights, expert interviews, and practical strategies to help you confidently integrate the science of fascia into your therapeutic approach. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just starting out, our goal is to equip you with high-quality, evidence-based, and fascia-informed continuing education opportunities that will enhance your skills and benefit your clients. So join us as we unravel the complexities of fascia and transform the way you practice occupational therapy. All health and wellness practitioners are welcome. Let's learn, grow, and evolve together. Hi, I'm Amy, and this is another edition of the Fascia-Informed Therapist. Today, I'd like to go through a simple little framework that I use when I get asked to speak at different organizations or meetings, and it seems like lately this has kind of become a thing for me. And I might get told I have 20, 30 minutes, sometimes it's 45, but I can expand and shrink if I have to. I can talk about fascia for a very long time, but it seems like lately what I've been asked to do, and I'm actually going to do one later today, is speak to people who really don't know anything about fascia. Well, I guess I can't say that. I'm speaking to a group they're not occupational therapy practitioners or rehab, or they're professional people who have gathered together for maybe a networking group or some kind of other sort of group meeting, and they just are looking for someone to speak, and someone knows me and they ask me to come talk to them. So they're people with all different sorts of backgrounds, and I don't ever really know what I'm walking into in terms of, there might be people in the group. I suspect today there might be people in the group who have medical backgrounds. In fact, I know there's 2, but the rest are just professional people. It's a professional networking group that a friend of mine asked me to speak at for her, because apparently they do a round robin, and she's done it a couple times but doesn't like to speak in front of people, and I've gotten pretty comfortable with that, being an academic for so long. I still get really nervous every time I get up and speak, but I know once I get going I will be absolutely fine. So I'm inviting you to listen in, and if you're a therapist who speaks to people about fascia, then maybe you can borrow my framework. You can use it to maybe start creating your own framework and maybe offering to speak to people about fascia. And that might be professionals, or it might just be the public, but I think there needs to be, obviously I think there needs to be much greater awareness of this body system that we have, so that we can have better health overall from the public perspective. But from a therapist perspective, a practitioner perspective, really lends to our overall ability to problem solve when we have this more complete picture of the human body and how it functions. So how do I approach a talk like this? I start off with just introducing myself, of course, and how I landed in front of them on that particular day, and then a little bit about my background. And I try to cram my 30-some years into a very tight capsule, but just so they know that I've been practicing fascia-informed techniques and studying and looking for the science of fascia for a very long time. I always think it's important to share your background when you're talking to somebody, so they know the lens that you're looking through and speaking through when you're talking to them. It's not just to establish your credentials, although it is in a way, but it's also just, we all have a bias, we all have a lens, and sharing that helps your audience be a slightly more critical thinker when they're trying to digest what you're sharing. So I always start with that, and I try to keep it really boiled down. Sometimes I give more than others, depending on the audience, but you get to decide that, of course. The next thing I throw out there is, tell me a body system that you know something about. And then that immediately gets the audience engaged. You've got active learning going on. You know they're paying attention. You can kind of figure out who's maybe the most interested, and it starts to tell you something about who your audience is, and you can use that later in your talk if something comes up that would be interesting to connect back with. So people start throwing out, muscular system, skeletal system, digestive system. And then I ask them to tell me something they know about it. Like there may be somebody in the room that says, oh, my aunt just went to a lymphatic therapist, and she had swelling, or things like that. So it just sort of gets the conversation rolling and the audience engaged, and then you can fill in the blanks with whatever systems they left out. And then I ask them, well, why do we learn about our body? So when did you first learn about it, and why? And normally I hear something like grade school or junior high, and we started learning about it in health class, so we knew how to take care of our bodies and things along those lines. And then I'm like, well, how do you know how to take care of your body today? What informs you? And of course people are going to say, well, my doctor or my therapist. But then people start talking about the media, social media, the news, articles that come out in magazines and newspapers. The media informs them a lot about how they should be taking care of their bodies. And that, again, sets the tone for moving forward. Why do we need to know about our body? Well, they learn lots about their muscular system, their digestive system from listening to the media, and they know why they should take care of their bodies from that perspective. But then, of course, nobody's talking about the fascial system. So I start sharing a little bit about this system that maybe they've heard a little bit through media, maybe they've heard a little bit through the beauty industry or the yoga industry or the sports industry. And sometimes somebody will say, oh yeah, what Michael Phelps used cupping, was that fascia related? And yes, we might have a little conversation about that. So then I start sharing some facts about fascia, and some of the facts about fascia that make the one that makes the most impact with people, and they start opening their eyes and listening in, is, well, did you know that your fascia has anywhere from 8 to 10 times more nerves inside of it than in your muscular system? And that means that your brain is very interested in what's going on in your fascial system. If nature has created us in a way that you have so many nerves embedded in that system, there's got to be some purpose to this system besides being a packing material that we used to be told that this is. That really gets people listening in. And then I talk about how the fascial system is not just its own body system, it's the environment of every other body system that we talked about earlier today. It doesn't just surround every body system and sort of your organs float inside of the fascia. The fascia actually sends out collagen structures that hold on to those organs, that hold on to the nerves, that hold on to the circulatory structures, and that's how it keeps everything in its place. It's got to be just strong enough to keep everything in place, but it's got to be stretchy enough to allow you to move around. And then usually I do some little arm motions or some twisting of my body to show that, okay, imagine what's going on inside of me right now. This fascia has to be just right in terms of its tensional properties to hold everything where it belongs, but yet allow me to stretch and move and twist and do all these complex motions. So giving people some imagery to see if you're willing to get up and do those kinds of things. But that gets people really thinking about how important it must be. And then also I throw in the fact that the fascia has to have that just right tension to hold us up against gravity. And if we didn't have the fascia, the muscles and the bones would all just fall to the floor. It is not the muscles and bones that hold us up against gravity. And I might throw in a little bit about tensegrity and tension structures, tension bridges that are held up by the tension in the wires as opposed to the hard pieces, the structural pieces, the steel. That takes me into the next piece of how we experience problems in our body when we get too much tension in our fascial system. And how do we get too much tension in our fascial system? And I start to throw some things out, like injuries to our body, sometime when it's a single incident, like a motor vehicle accident or a surgery. Our fascia is designed to protect us. So when we have these injuries or insults to our body, the fascial system will tighten up in order to try and protect us. But then we can also have repetitive type injuries, and those can be things like participation in sports. And it can be even some, benign sports like soccer, but kids fall and people run into each other and the ball hits you in the head, and we can have repetitive responses of our fascial system. We can have those repetitive responses in our fascial system that would increase layers of tension. Other pieces would be things like long-term poor posture choices, and people start straightening up in their chairs when I start heading into the posture conversation. But I will make sure they know that any posture you can create in your body is not a bad posture. But when you choose a single posture most of the time, that is when it can become problematic in regards to the tension in your fascia. And then I go into a little bit about the fibroblasts, and I explain how the pressures in your body inform the fibroblasts of what to do. They either produce more collagen or they take it away. They do a lot of other stuff too, but we know that. If you've taken the science class, you know that. But I focus on just those two. They either produce more collagen or they take the collagen away. And I might give them a little example. So I might be standing there and then I'll shift all my weight into my right hip. So I'll say, okay, how many of you have the habit of shifting into one hip when you're standing and talking to somebody? And some of that, you'll see their eyes kind of rolling up in their head thinking about, oh yeah, I do that. And if you have a buildup, the fibroblasts are interpreting that pressure as, let's give some more structural support on the side that you tend to lean into, and maybe even taking a little bit away on the opposite side. And then that might be great. That supports you in your preferred posture. But then when you have to move into an activity where you need both hips functioning equally, like walking, then you're going to have a little stiffness on one side, and that's going to change your gait pattern. And it might be very subtly at first, but it can definitely do that over time. Then we move into being sedentary, and most of our jobs are very sedentary. We're probably sitting in a scenario where everybody's going to be sitting for half an hour, listening to me talk. So we just have such a sedentary culture, and that starts to shape us as well. The next piece I shared that can potentially feed into fascial tension is choosing only linear exercise. Linear exercise can really limit the movement of our body, even though some of that exercise is very good for us. It can be very limiting in terms of how it moves our tissues and our joints and our bodies, because we're not getting outside of those linear planes, and then we're not stretching and moving into places that need that stretching in order to balance the tension in our bodies. So linear exercise, though, although it can be good for us in some ways, can create an imbalance in the tension of our fascial system. And then, of course, we have things that can increase fascial tension through increases in inflammation, things like poor hydration, poor nutrition, poor breathing practices, and then, of course, stress. Before I go on, I do always say the floor is open for questions. If they want me to expand on any part of any of that, they are more than welcome to ask questions. And if I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole, which I'm very capable of doing, then I will try to pull it back and say, okay, let's keep moving on, or we'll never get through all of this, and we'll save time as we can for questions at the end. The next piece I go to is, okay, if we have all these layers of stress, and the stress can stay in our bodies or the tension can stay in our bodies for a very long time, then what happens next, or what's the result of that increased tension? And then I talk about how the fascia is all one system. It's all interconnected from head to toe, side to side, front to back. And when you have tension in one part of the body, I might hold on to, I always try to remember to wear a stretchy shirt, then I might wad up the side. A lot of you have probably seen that on videos and stuff. But that gives them a visual of how that pull can go so many different places just by wadding up and putting tension in one part of my shirt. And then thinking about that as, if I had an outfit on that was all one piece, then that tension could also go downward. But then also thinking how the fascia is three-dimensional, and how if this shirt went inside my body, that tension would be going into and around my organs, and remembering that the fascia doesn't just surround the organs, it is invested in it. It embeds itself within it in order to hold it where it belongs. So imagine the pulls that might be happening on the organs and the nerves and the circulatory, all the structures and systems inside our body. So the biggest piece I want them to think about is how the fascia, then when there's tension in the fascia, it can pull on those, but it also can create barriers. Can create barriers in the body so that fluids cannot flow. And it is the fluids that really give us our health and healing. So the next piece is, well, what can you do? Where is your power in this? And people are thinking, oh gosh, I need to go to the doctor. I need to figure this out. And I want them to know that they have a lot of power in what they can do about that tension in their body. And of course, the first one is, well, you can go work with a therapist who knows how to help you with your fascia from either a hands-on modality perspective, or helping you work on your posture, or helping you identify nonlinear exercise choices. You can do a whole lot. So maybe starting with a therapist if you want to get going and you want to hit the ground running and have greater traction, then you might start there. But so much you can do on your own. And then one of the first ones is trying to minimize the inflammation in your body through better hydration, better nutrition, getting your stress under control. And then seeking out nonlinear exercise, like something as simple as yoga, something as simple as adding some stretching to your routine before or after, preferably after you walk, for example. Doesn't mean you have to give up that linear. Again, very good for us, but adding in that non-linear. Like sometimes I'll ask people, when's the last time you actually reached overhead full extension of your shoulders. And oftentimes people are like, oh, wow, yeah, no, I haven't done that. Well, no wonder we have a lot of shoulder issues in our culture. And then, of course, myofascial self-treatment. I just taught a myofascial self-treatment workshop. I taught the level 1. Caitlin's been teaching it for the last year, but I had to jump in and teach one because she had to go to her hospital job. And man, it always floors me how people, when they come to that workshop, how blown away they are on how their body feels. And a friend of mine contacted me, and she was having issues with her SI joint, and she had been to a couple doctors. She had been in traditional therapy for a couple months, and she really wasn't having any relief. And she had just sat in a experience the weekend before where she had to sit cross-legged with a bunch of other people for a while. And I was in so much pain, but I had to sit there. I couldn't move. And by the time we start at the feet and we work our way up, by the time we were done stretching our calves in the self-treatment workshop, she was, I don't hurt anymore. She was almost in tears. It was just, I don't hurt anymore. I feel better. How did this do this in 20 minutes when I've been working on this for 2 months? So I don't usually, sometimes I try to weave in stories. I probably won't weave that story in when I do this later today. We'll see how much time I have. The next piece I like to weave in is what's happening in the world now in terms of fascia. And I start by talking about how the worlds of sports and beauty and yoga are really latching on to the science of fascia and integrating that into what they know. They just don't have the same evidence-based requirements that we do in the healthcare system, and that we need that first in order to start using information. We don't necessarily, but we generally should, and we like to, of course. But beauty and sports and yoga can just jump right in and use whatever it is coming out, give it a try, see how it works. I talk about that a little bit, then I tell them how so much research is coming out from overseas, but we are starting to pay attention in the United States. And I talk a little bit about the NIH and how our integrative branch director, Helene Langevin, has a research interest in fascia, and how they're starting to spend a lot of money in grant funding to try and better understand what differentiates healthy fascia from unhealthy fascia. And then I link that back to, we know that we want to know these things because we have so many nerves in our fascia. That's where the research is saying that a lot of our pain is coming from. And the NIH is acknowledging that and connecting that information with our opioid epidemic. And we need to figure this type of pain out and what we can do about it. And that often makes people go, oh, really? Okay, wow, that's interesting. Because almost everybody, knows somebody with pain or has pain themselves. And a lot of us know somebody who has been affected by by addiction, prescription addiction. So that gets people definitely paying attention. I usually drop a little bit of information about how long it takes for science to get into the hands of clinicians, and how they can use the science, and just for that to become commonplace. And that the research says is about 17 years, sometimes more, depending on the situation. But I'm letting them know then that fascia is being considered a variable in a lot of the research that's coming out. And depending on how much time I have, I might talk a little bit about an example in each one of these areas. So I go through a little bit about pain, a little bit about mental health, a little bit about oncology, because again, everybody knows somebody, if it's not themselves, that has an issue in these areas. Menopause, aging, balance and fall prevention, TMD or jaw pain, and immune system health and function. And that helps getting people think, okay, so this body system is really involved in a lot of different areas of health and function. Maybe I need to pay attention. So I tell them my goal as a practitioner and educator is to try and speed that process up, that process of getting this science into the hands of the public and into the hands of other clinicians, so they don't have to wait that 17 years. And then I open the floor for questions. It's always interesting, the types of questions that I get. It runs the gamut from, but most of the time people are asking questions about themselves and their experience of pain or someone that they know and love. So I hope you can use this format as a structure for a talk that you might want to give. Once you take the science course, then you might have your own ideas about how you might frame that, depending on who you're speaking to or what your goal is, or if you're trying to not just educate but get referrals, you definitely want to tailor that to the either the group or the person that you are trying to explain this information to. An example of that might be if you're going to go talk to some dentists about how you can use a fascia-informed approach to helping someone with jaw pain. That might include myofascial techniques. That might include teaching them how to stretch with their fascia in mind. That might include teaching them about posture and its influence and how that can shape or misalign the jaw. I think I'm hoping that you get the picture how you can, we do that anyway as therapists, right? When we're trying to talk to referrals, we're trying to gauge it and make it of interest to them, not to waste anybody's time, but to just provide the education. And most referral sources, they want help, they need help, and approach any of your what we might think of as sales as education. It's simply education. We're all trying to do our best and help people. All right, thank you so very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. I'd like to give just a little quick update. I'm back from my presentation today, and it was a really great group. I thought I had about 30 minutes when I went, but then they're like, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, we'll see how this goes. So I followed my framework fairly well. I did skip over some details. I didn't talk about things like fibroblasts or diaphragmatic breathing or get into the weeds that I might get into if I had more time. But I did, when they told me that 20 minutes was up, I started to go ahead and sit down, and they're like, hey, you're supposed to have time for Q&A. And I'm like, oh, sweet, more time. So I had a really great question, and it was kind of like I said at the end of the podcast, that people tend to ask questions about something that has to do with themselves or a loved one. And this person asked about, I've been getting a lot of tension and headaches, and I can feel them in my scalp and the back of my neck. And, what does this fascia thing have to do with that? And I said, oh my gosh, thank you. I skipped over my piece on fibroblasts. So I'm going to educate the group on fibroblasts. And, there was a counselor in the room and a chiropractor in the room, and then an occupational therapist who invited me to come and speak to the group. Anyway, so they're just a couple medical professionals in the area. Otherwise, there was a lot of diversity in who was in the room in terms of professions. So I explained the very, very basics. You have this cell in your fascial system, and this cell has a lot of responsibilities, but I only want you to understand two. And it can either make more collagen to support your fascia, or it can take it away by secreting a substance. And the only way this little cell knows what to do in your body is through the pressures that you put into it. And I gave two examples. One was forward head posture, and the other was, if you're standing, dumping into your right hip or shifting your weight into your right hip most of the time, and how the fascia will build that up if it detects that constant pressure in the right hip, and it might even take some away in the left hip. And that can be fine if that's all you're going to do in life is shift into your right hip, but chances are you need to walk and you need a balanced hip support and strength. And then I gave the example of the forward head posture and how, okay, if your 8 to 10 pound head is forward all the time, then your fibroblasts are going to read that they need to provide you some extra support in your choice of posture. And they're just trying to help you. But if you imagine that web, and I usually use my hands and I weave my fingers together, creating a little lattice, if you can imagine that web being tighter and tighter, and then I push my fingers together to create smaller holes in the lattice, and everything that runs through that structure, the circulatory, the nerves, all the fluids in your body, have less space, and that's going to increase the sensation of tension, the pressure on the nerves, less fluid flow. That can absolutely lead to headaches. So my best recommendation, go get some work done, go to a self-treatment workshop, work on your posture, come talk to a therapist like me if you want help with that. So that was one of the questions. I want to say there was another one. We didn't have a lot of time for questions, but anyway, it was the follow-up. It was super fun to do that and, let people know you can get out there and talk about this topic. And people are really craving and looking for answers. And they went around the room after I was done talking, and a lot of people said, whoa, that just made me think about everything going on in my body. People are having a lot of experience of pain, and we're needed out there. Our information, whether you're going to lay hands on somebody or not, our information, our knowledge is very, very helpful to helping them relieve that pain. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Fascia-Informed Therapist. It's been a pleasure sharing insights and strategies to help you integrate fascia science into your practice. I'm Amy Mayer, and I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore further and take your therapeutic skills to the next level. Remember, we're committed to creating and providing top-notch, evidence-based, fascia-informed continuing education that empowers you as an occupational therapy practitioner. Stay connected with us for more enriching content, and don't forget to check out our online courses to deepen your expertise. Until next time, keep expanding your knowledge, refining your skills, and confidently applying the science of fascia to your practice. Here's to advancing together in health and wellness.